The massive doors opened with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Ambassador Marcus Webb stepped into the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, and for one brief moment his breath caught in his throat. The chamber stretched upward for nearly a kilometer, its curved walls covered with the glowing emblems of 3,000 species. Floating platforms held delegations from worlds Marcus had never heard of. Creatures of light drifted alongside beings made of living stone. The air itself seemed to hum with power and ancient authority. This was the heart of galactic civilization. This was where empires rose and fell with a single vote. And today, humanity stood on trial. Marcus forced himself to walk forward, his small delegation of 5 humans following behind him. Lieutenant Commander Faye Torres walked at his right shoulder, her face calm despite the fear Marcus knew she felt. They were the youngest species ever to stand in this chamber. Earth had only joined the galactic community 80 years ago. Some of the beings watching them had been spacefaring for millions of years. High Arbiter Thelox rose from the central throne. The Arbiter was a being of pure crystal, its body catching the chamber's blue light and scattering it into rainbow patterns across the walls. When it spoke, the translation, systems carried its voice to every ear in the chamber. Humanity of Earth, you have been summoned before the Galactic Council to answer charges of the gravest. Nature. Marcus stopped at the designated position, a circle of silver embedded in the floor. He looked up at the Arbiter, refusing to show weakness. We are here to answer, he said simply. A wet, gurgling sound came from the prosecution platform. Ambassador Gulax of the Varadi Confederacy stepped forward, his massive form contained within an environmental suit that hissed with each movement. The Varadi were ancient, powerful, and deeply hostile to humanity's rapid expansion into galactic affairs. The charges are clear, Gulax announced, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Humanity has violated the sacred non-interference doctrine on 52 separate occasions. 52 times they have entered sovereign systems without permission. 52 times they have shared restricted technology with primitive species. 52 times they have disrupted the natural development of civilizations, not their own. The number rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. 52 violations. No species in galactic history had accumulated such a record. High Arbiter Thelox's crystalline form pulsed with cold light. The evidence has been reviewed. The documentation is extensive. Ambassador Webb, do you deny these 52 incidents? Marcus felt the weight of 3,000 species pressing down upon him. His people's entire future rested on what he said next. No, he answered. We do not deny the incidents. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even Faye turned to look at him with alarm. Gulax's laugh was thick and ugly. The human admits guilt. This trial is over before it begins. I admit the actions, Marcus continued, his voice cutting through the noise. Whether they constitute violations is what this council must determine. Thelox raised a crystalline limb for silence. Explain your meaning, Ambassador. High Arbiter, the non-interference doctrine exists to protect developing species from exploitation and conquest. It is a noble law, written by wise beings who understood the dangers of power. Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. But humanity asks this council to consider context. We ask you to hear why we took these actions before you condemn us for them. Gulax moved forward aggressively. Context cannot excuse 52 violations. The law is clear. The penalty is absolute. And what is the penalty? Marcus asked, turning to face the council. Thelox answered with terrible finality. Complete isolation. Your colonies will be dismantled. Your starships confiscated. Your homeworld quarantined and monitored for 1,000 standard cycles. Humanity will be returned to pre-contact status. 1,000 years. Marcus felt the words like physical blows. 1,000 years trapped on Earth, while the galaxy moved on without them. Their children's children's children would grow old and die before humanity saw the stars again. "We request the right to present a defense," Marcus said. "We ask only that the Council hear our witnesses before passing judgment." Gulax stepped forward, his suit hissing with agitation. What witnesses could possibly excuse such blatant disregard for galactic law? The humans are guilty. They know they are guilty. This is merely a delay tactic. "Perhaps," Thelok said slowly, "but the right to defense is sacred in this chamber. It predates even the doctrine you claim to protect, Ambassador Gulax." The Arbiter's attention returned to Marcus. "You have 3 cycles to prepare. Present your case, Ambassador Webb, but I warn you, the evidence against your species is overwhelming." As the session adjourned, the chamber erupted in conversation. Thousands of species discussed humanity's fate in languages no human could understand. Marcus stood motionless, watching the currents of power flow around him. Gulax approached, his environmental suit casting a shadow over the human delegation. "You should have accepted the sentence," the Varati whispered. "Now you will suffer the humiliation of failure before your exile begins." Marcus met the alien's gaze through the murky visor. "Ambassador Gulax, you built your case on the assumption that our interventions were acts of expansion. Imperial moves designed to build influence. Were they not?" "No," Marcus smiled slightly. "They were something your species has apparently forgotten how to recognize." "And what is that?" "Helping people who needed help." Marcus turned and walked away, leaving Gulax standing in confused silence in the corridor outside. Faye caught up with him, her face pale with worry. "Sir, we cannot fight 52 documented interventions. The evidence is irrefutable. Every action is recorded, time-stamped, and verified." Marcus stopped at a viewport overlooking the station's vast docking ring. Ships from 1,000 worlds floated in organized formations, each one representing a civilization that would vote on humanity's fate. "We are not going to fight the evidence, Lieutenant. We are going to present it differently." "How?" Marcus pulled out his communication device and began composing a message. Every one of those 52 incidents involved humans helping another species. The Varati see violations. But the species we helped might see something else entirely. Understanding dawned in Faye's eyes. "You want to call them as witnesses. All 52 of them. We helped them when no one else would. Now we will see if they remember." He finished the message and prepared to send it across the galaxy. "Contact Earth. Begin protocol, remember. Find every species involved in those 52 incidents. Tell them that Earth still stands with them, and ask them one simple question." "What question, sir?" Marcus sent the message and watched it disappear into the vast communication networks of the galaxy. "Ask them if they stand with us." 3 days passed in tense preparation. The human delegation worked without sleep, sending messages to distant worlds and waiting for responses that might never come. Gulax spent his time securing votes from council members, who saw this as an opportunity to limit humanity's growing influence. The Varati had dominated trade in the outer sectors for millennia, and Earth's merchant fleets had been cutting into their profits. When the defense session began, the Grand Chamber was packed beyond capacity. Species that rarely attended council proceedings had sent representatives. Everyone wanted to witness humanity's desperate attempt to escape justice. Marcus rose and addressed High Arbiter Thelok with steady calm. "We call our first witness not a human, but a representative of the Mallory Collective." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Mallory were a minor species of small insectoid beings. They had only joined the galactic community recently and were rarely noticed in major proceedings. Gulax immediately objected. "This is a human trial. Human witnesses only. Thelox considered this. The accused may call witnesses relevant to their defense. Proceed, Ambassador Webb. A small figure moved through the chamber toward the witness platform. Crix, representative of the Mallory Collective, stood barely half a meter tall. Its compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights in fractured patterns. State your connection to the charges. Thelox instructed. Crix's voice was soft, but carried clearly through the translation systems. 15 years ago, my species faced extinction. A viral plague spread across our world, killing millions each day. We had not yet achieved interstellar travel. We were alone, dying, and desperate. The chamber fell silent. Even Gulax paused his objections. We found a way to send a distress signal into space, Crix continued. We did not know if anyone would hear. We did not know if other life existed. But we were dying, so we tried. Who answered this signal? Marcus asked. Many species heard us. The Varadi Confederacy heard us. The Eldari Federation heard us. The Council debated whether intervention was appropriate. The debates lasted weeks. Crix's antennae drooped with the memory. My people died by millions while the galaxy discussed paperwork. And then a human ship appeared in our sky. A medical frigate called the Healing Dawn. A doctor named Helen Okonjo led a team of scientists who worked alongside our own researchers. They did not simply give us a cure. They taught us to create one ourselves, building upon our own understanding of biology. Marcus nodded slowly. What would have happened without this intervention? Crix was silent for a long moment. We would be extinct. Every Mallory alive today exists because humanity did not wait for permission to save us. Gulax rose angrily. This is exactly the violation we are prosecuting. Humans shared advanced medical knowledge with a pre-warp civilization. They contaminated natural development. They saved us, Crix replied, and there was steel in that soft voice. Your debates would have produced a very thorough report on our extinction. The second witness was called. Ambassador Torvin of the Olosi Federation floated forward on a platform designed for aquatic beings. The Olosi were respected across the galaxy, their testimony carrying significant weight. Tell the Council your experience, Marcus requested. Torvin's gills fluttered as he spoke. 20 years ago, an Olosi exploration vessel suffered catastrophic equipment failure. 3,000 of my people were stranded in space, claimed by the Craft Dominion. The Craft considered our presence an invasion and prepared to destroy our ship. Did you request assistance from the Council? We begged for assistance, but the Craft were too powerful. No species wanted to risk war for 3,000 explorers. The Council expressed sympathy and offered to begin diplomatic discussions that would take months. What happened? Torvin made a sound that the translation systems rendered as bitter laughter. An Earth destroyer squadron appeared between our ship and the Krath war fleet. Captain Diego Vargas transmitted one message to the Krath commander. He said, "We are taking our friends home. You can let us pass, or you can explain to the galaxy why you opened fire on a rescue mission." The chamber buzzed with reaction. The Krath were notoriously aggressive. Confronting them was considered suicidal. The Krath backed down, Torvin continued. Captain Vargas escorted our vessel to safety. When I asked him why his people risked war for strangers, he seemed confused by the question. He said that on Earth, you do not abandon people who need help. Gulax demanded the floor. 2 witnesses prove nothing. Emotional stories cannot excuse systematic violation of sacred law. Marcus smiled slightly. Then the Council should prepare for many more emotional stories. We have 50 more witnesses to present. The announcement sent shockwaves through the chamber. 50 more species would come forward, each with their own story of human intervention. Thelox raised a crystalline limb. Ambassador Webb, this will take months. Perhaps, Marcus agreed. But if 52 violations deserve a 1,000-year sentence, surely 52 explanations deserve a few months of patience. The session adjourned in chaos. Representatives huddled in groups, discussing this unexpected development. The human delegation had transformed a straightforward trial into something far more complicated. In the corridor, Faye approached Marcus with a data tablet. "Sir, we have received 31 confirmations. 31 of the 52 species are sending representatives to testify. And the other 21? Still waiting for responses. Some are very distant. Some may not have received our message yet." Marcus looked out at the stars beyond the station's viewports. 31 species had answered already. 31 civilizations remembered what humanity had done for them. "Keep sending messages," he said. "Every species that comes forward is another crack in Galax's case. Sir, even if all 52 testify, the Varadi will argue that good intentions do not excuse broken laws. Perhaps not." Marcus turned from the viewport, his eyes hard with determination. "But when the galaxy hears what we have done, they will have to ask themselves a question. They will have to ask what kind of civilization punishes people for saving lives." Faye was quiet for a moment. "You are gambling everything on their conscience." "No, Lieutenant. I am gambling on something simpler." Marcus began walking toward their quarters, exhaustion evident in his stride. "I am gambling that somewhere in this galaxy of ancient and powerful beings, there are still some who remember what it feels like to need help and receive it. Behind them, the first representatives of the 52 species were already arriving at the station, traveling from distant worlds to speak for the humans who had once spoken for them. The testimonies continued for weeks. Each day brought new witnesses to the Grand Chamber, each carrying stories that had never been heard by the galactic community. A pattern began to emerge, and even the most hostile observers could not ignore it. The Venari came first among the new witnesses. They were ancient scholars, keepers of knowledge stretching back millions of years. Their representative, a being of flowing silver robes and gentle voice, told of their library world. "Our planet held the accumulated wisdom of 100 extinct civilizations," the Venari scholar explained. "Knowledge that could never be replaced. And corporate raiders from the Telex Consortium began strip mining our world for rare minerals beneath our libraries." "Did you appeal to the Council?" Marcus asked. "We did. The Telex Consortium was too economically powerful. No species would challenge them for the sake of old books and dead languages. What happened? A human archaeological team, led by Professor Anders Lindquist, documented the destruction. They broadcast it across every communication network in the galaxy. They made our tragedy impossible to ignore. The resulting scandal forced the Council to intervene. The Venari's silver robes rippled with emotion. Our knowledge survives because humans understood that some things matter more than politics. The Thuriks came next. They were nomads, travelers who had lived on generation ships for so long that no one remembered their original homeworld. Their vessel had suffered a critical failure in deep space, and they had drifted for months, sending distress calls. No species answered, the Thuriks captain testified. We had no planet, no vote in the Council, no economic value. We were dying slowly in the void. Who found you? A human cargo hauler, Captain Ileana Petrescu. She picked up our signal and diverted from her profitable route to reach us. She spent 3 weeks helping us repair our engines. She gave us food from her own stores. She lost her contract and nearly went bankrupt. Did she ask for anything in return? The Thuriks captain made a gesture of disbelief. I asked her why she did it. She looked at me as though I had asked a very strange question. She said ships help ships out here. That is how it works. Day after day, the stories accumulated. The Gorati testified about human intelligence agents who helped expose trafficking networks, preying on their youth. The Silkathi spoke of human engineers who prevented a cascade failure in their planet's power grid. The Moratti described human diplomats who mediated a civil war that had lasted generations. Faye noticed the changing atmosphere in the chamber. Species that had seemed hostile were now listening intently. Delegations that had supported the Verratti prosecution were whispering among themselves. During a recess, she approached a young delegate from the Cori Assembly, a species she did not recognize from the witness list. "Your people are not among our witnesses," she said. "Yet you have attended every session." The Cori delegate introduced himself as Nilos. His large, dark eyes held an ancient sadness. "My grandmother was on a colony transport that lost navigation 50 years ago. They wandered for 3 years, slowly starving. A human explorer found them. That incident is not in our records. He never reported it. He gave them his own ship's food stores and guided them to safety. He died of malnutrition 2 weeks before they reached port." Nilos paused. "We only learned the full story years later. He never sought credit. He simply helped, and then he died helping." Faye felt something tighten in her chest. "How many stories like yours exist?" Nilos looked around the chamber at the hundreds of delegations. "More than you know. More than anyone counted. Your records show 52 incidents, because those were the ones that were documented. But humans have been helping strangers in the void since they first reached the stars. Most of those stories were never written down." Meanwhile, Galax grew increasingly desperate. He interrupted testimonies with procedural objections. He challenged witness credentials. He demanded recesses and filed complaints. His case had been built on the assumption that humanity's interventions were imperial moves designed to build dependencies and expand influence. But these stories painted a different picture entirely. Humans were not conquering. They were not building an empire. They were simply helping anyone who needed help, often at great cost to themselves, often with no expectation of return. "This changes nothing," Galax argued during one heated session. "Good intentions do not excuse broken laws. The non-interference doctrine exists for reasons. It prevents powerful species from dominating weaker ones through dependence." Marcus rose to respond. "Ambassador Galax, every species that has testified was facing crisis, extinction, destruction, death. The law you claim to protect was designed to preserve developing civilizations. How does it preserve them to watch them die? The law is the law. Then perhaps the law is incomplete." The chamber erupted in reaction. No species had ever publicly questioned the non-interference doctrine. It was the foundation of galactic civilization, written by ancient empires who had learned the cost of unchecked expansion. High Arbiter Thelox called for order. The crystalline being's form pulsed with complex light patterns that Marcus could not interpret. 41 witnesses have testified, Thelox announced. The pattern of evidence is clear. Humanity has intervened repeatedly in the affairs of other species. A pause. The question of whether these interventions constitute violations remains to be determined. Galax seized on this opening. "High Arbiter, the pattern proves exactly what I alleged. Systematic interference across multiple systems over decades. This is not random charity. This is organized expansion, disguised as compassion. Then humanity shall have the opportunity to complete their defense," Thelox replied. 11 witnesses remain. As the session adjourned, Faye found Marcus staring at the chamber's vast ceiling, where the emblems of 3,000 species glowed with ancient light. "We are winning," she said quietly. "We are shifting opinions," Marcus corrected. "That is not the same as winning. Galax is wounded, but not defeated. He will have something planned. A final weapon he has been holding back. What could he possibly have left?" Marcus shook his head. "I do not know. But the Varati have survived for millions of years by being ruthless and patient. We have hurt their position badly. They will not accept defeat without striking back. Far across the chamber, Galax watched the human delegation with eyes that burned with cold hatred. His environmental suit hissed as he turned to his aides and spoke in a language no human understood. "Prepare the Tessari file," he commanded. "If they want to present evidence, we shall present evidence of our own." The 41st testimony was underway when Galax made his move. A representative from the Silkathi Dominion was describing how human engineers had prevented a catastrophic power grid failure on their world. When the Varadi ambassador rose and demanded emergency recognition, High Arbiter, Thelox paused the testimony. "State your purpose, Ambassador Galax." "I have obtained evidence of a current violation," Galax announced, his voice ringing with triumph. "While humanity parades their witnesses before this council, they are actively breaking galactic law at this very moment." A hush fell over the chamber. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Current violation. Something was happening right now that he knew nothing about. Galax activated a holographic display at the center of the chamber. Images appeared showing a star system marked in Varadi territorial colors. A planet swirled with blue and green, clearly supporting life. "The Tessari system," Galax explained. "A protected observation zone under Varadi authority. The Tessari are a primitive species, barely capable of powered flight. They do not know that other intelligent life exists in the universe." The images shifted to show sensor data. A ship was clearly visible in the system, its configuration unmistakably human. "The U is hopeful," Galax continued. "A human military vessel currently operating within Tessari space. This footage was captured 3 days ago. The humans are contaminating a protected primitive civilization while simultaneously claiming innocence in this very chamber." The chamber exploded with reaction. Marcus turned to Faye, whose face had gone pale as she frantically accessed secure channels to Earth. "Is it true?" he demanded quietly. Her voice shook. "There is a ship there. The Hopeful. It diverted from patrol 3 weeks ago. No authorization on record." Marcus felt the floor shifting beneath him. Months of careful defense, 41 witnesses, the slowly turning tide of opinion, all of it threatened by one rogue ship whose presence he could not explain. That Galax pressed his advantage. "I call for immediate judgment. Humanity has proven beyond any doubt that they cannot be trusted. Even while defending themselves against charges of intervention, they continue to violate galactic law. There can be no further debate." High Arbiter Thelox's crystalline form pulsed with urgent light. "Ambassador Webb, what say you to this evidence?" Marcus stood motionless. He had no answer. He had no explanation. Everything he had built was crumbling around him. Then his communication device vibrated against his chest. A message from Earth, marked urgent and personal. The sender was his daughter, Elena, who worked in Fleet Logistics. He opened the message and found a single data file. The Hopeful's navigation logs, recovered from a backup server that official channels had not yet accessed. Marcus read the logs. His hands began to tremble. And then, impossibly, he began to laugh. The grand chamber fell silent in confusion. The human ambassador was laughing while his entire civilization faced annihilation. "Ambassador Webb," Thelox said with evident concern. "Are you experiencing a malfunction?" "No, High Arbiter." Marcus controlled himself with effort, though a smile remained on his face. "I apologize. I now understand why the Hopeful is in the Tessari system. And I believe this council needs to hear the truth, because it represents everything this trial is truly about." Galax stepped forward aggressively. "There is no truth that can excuse this violation. The ship is there without authorization. The facts are undeniable. The ship is there," Marcus agreed. "And I will explain why." He transmitted the navigation logs to the central display. 6 months ago, long-range sensors detected an asteroid on collision course with the Tessari homeworld. The impact was calculated to cause an extinction-level event. Every living thing on that planet would die within years of the strike. Silence fell across the chamber. Commander Nadia Volkov of the Hopeful reported this finding through official channels. The response came within hours. Do nothing. The Tessari system is under Varadi protection. Any intervention would violate treaties and trigger exactly the prosecution we are now facing. Marcus turned to face the council directly. Commander Volkov did the math. The asteroid would strike in 8 months. Council deliberations would take years. By the time permission was granted, the Tessari would be extinct. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. So she made a choice. The Hopeful entered the Tessari system in silent running mode. They could not destroy the asteroid because the explosion would be visible from the surface and contaminate the Tessari's development. Instead, they attached gravity tethers to the asteroid and spent weeks slowly, imperceptibly nudging it onto a new trajectory. The holographic display now showed the asteroid's original path and its new course, carefully diverted to miss the planet. The Tessari will never know how close they came to extinction. They will never know that aliens exist or that one of those aliens gave up her career and her freedom to save them. Marcus's voice hardened. Commander Volkov knew she would be court-martialed. She knew her actions would be used against Earth. She did it anyway, because she could not watch 1 billion innocent beings die while paperwork was filed. Galax's suit hissed with agitation. This changes nothing. The violation is the violation, regardless of intent. Does it change nothing? Marcus turned to the Varadi ambassador. You knew about this asteroid, did you not? Your observation posts detected it 1 year before we did. Your own records show you classified it as a natural phenomenon and took no action. Galax was silent. You were prepared to watch an entire species die rather than compromise your territorial claims. Marcus let the accusation hang in the air. That is what following the law means to you. High Arbiter Thelox rose from the central throne, crystalline form blazing with light. Is this accusation true, Ambassador Galax? Did the Varadi know of this threat and take no action? Galax's silence was answer enough. Marcus looked across the chamber at the hundreds of species who had spent weeks listening to stories of human compassion. We do not deny our actions. We intervened 52 times. We broke your laws 52 times. And now you know why. Because when someone needed help, we could not stand by and watch them suffer. He pointed at Galax. That is the difference between us. When the Tessari faced extinction, the Varadi saw filing error. When we saw extinction, we saw people who deserved to live. The chamber erupted into chaos. Species that had supported the Varadi prosecution were now demanding answers. Delegations were withdrawing from alliances formed centuries ago. The entire political structure of the trial was collapsing. Thelox called for a recess to restore order. As representatives filed out in heated discussion, Faye approached Marcus with wonder in her eyes. That was impossible, she breathed. How did you know they had information about the asteroid? Marcus shook his head. I did not know, but the Varadi protect that system obsessively. They watch everything that happens there. They must have known about the asteroid, which me. And they made a choice to let the Tessari die. I gambled that exposing that choice would matter more than our violation. And if you had been wrong? Marcus looked toward the viewport, where the stars of a vast galaxy burned with ancient light. Then Commander Volkov would have sacrificed herself for nothing. But she was willing to take that risk. The least I could do was take a risk of my own. Somewhere across the galaxy, aboard the Hopeful, Commander Nadia Volkov waited in her quarters under guard, knowing that her career and possibly her freedom were over. She did not know that her sacrifice was about to change. Galactic history. The final session of humanity's trial began in a chamber transformed. The atmosphere had shifted completely. Where once hostility and suspicion had dominated, now something else filled the air. Species that had spent weeks listening to testimony sat in contemplative silence. Even traditional Varadi allies kept their distance from Galax, whose environmental suit seemed to have shrunk around him. High Arbiter Thelox called the session to order. The crystalline being's voice carried a weight that had not been there before. All evidence has been presented. All witnesses have spoken. This council must now render judgment. Marcus stood at the center of the chamber, exhausted but unbroken. Behind him, Phi and the small human delegation waited for the verdict that would determine their species. Fate. Then, movement caught his attention. Crix, the small insectoid from the Mellory Collective, was rising from the witness section. The tiny being moved across the chamber floor and took a position beside the human delegation. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Ambassador Torvin of the Elosi Federation rose next. The aquatic being's platform floated forward until it hovered near the humans. One by one, representatives from the 52 species began to move. The Venari in their silver robes, the Thurix captain and his delegation, the Goradi, the Sulkothi, the Marathi, all of them leaving their assigned positions to stand with humanity. Then Nilos, the young Kori delegate whose grandmother had been saved by a human who died giving help, walked to the front of the growing crowd. My people's savior died alone in the void so that strangers could live, he announced to the chamber. That is what humans are. They answer calls that others ignore. They pay prices that others refuse. And they do not ask permission to save lives. More species rose. Beings not on the witness list, delegations whose stories had never been formally told. They came forward by the dozens and by the hundreds. Representatives of worlds that had received human aid in moments never recorded, kindnesses never documented, sacrifices never acknowledged. Marcus watched in stunned silence as more than 200 delegates gathered around his small team. Species from across the galaxy, united not by treaties or trade agreements or political convenience, but by memory. Each one carried a story of a time when they needed help, when no one else came. When Earth answered, Galax's voice cut through the chamber with desperate fury. This is a trial, not a demonstration. These theatrics prove nothing about the law. They prove something about humanity, Thelox replied. The High Arbiter surveyed the transformed chamber, light cascading through crystalline form in complex patterns. The non-interference doctrine exists to protect developing species from exploitation. It was written by empires who had learned the cost of conquest. It is sacred law. Marcus braced himself for the sentence that would end everything. And yet, Thelox continued, sacred law written to protect life cannot be used to excuse the extinction of life, cannot be used to justify watching civilizations die while procedures are followed, cannot be used to punish those who chose compassion over compliance. Thelox turned to address Galax directly. The Varadi knew of the asteroid threatening the Tassari. Your own records confirm this. You classified it as a natural phenomenon and took no action. You were prepared to observe an extinction event rather than compromise territorial claims. Galax's suit hissed violently. We were following the law. You were following the letter while betraying the spirit. Thelox rose to full height, light blazing through the chamber. The law exists to protect life. It does not exist to end it. The Arbiter addressed the entire council. This body rules as follows. The 52 interventions by humanity are acknowledged as violations of the non-interference doctrine as currently written. Marcus felt his heart stop. However, Thelox continued, the non-interference doctrine is hereby found to be insufficient for circumstances involving existential threat to developing species. Gasps echoed through the chamber. A new provision shall be added to galactic law. It shall be called the Hopeful Doctrine, in recognition of the vessel and the commander whose sacrifice revealed this inadequacy. Under this new provision, when a species faces extinction and no authorized intervention is forthcoming, any member species may take necessary action to preserve life, provided they minimize cultural contamination and accept subsequent review. Thelox's attention returned to Marcus. Humanity is cleared of all charges. Your actions were ahead of your time, but your time has now come. Commander Volkov will be released with honors, and the crew of the Hopeful will be commended for their service. The chamber exploded with reaction. Species that had stood with humanity were celebrating. Others sat in shocked silence as the implications settled. Galactic law had been changed because of human compassion. The non-interference doctrine, unchanged for millions of years, had been rewritten because humans could not stop themselves from helping those in need. Galax stormed from the chamber, his case destroyed, his reputation ruined. The Varati had gambled everything on crushing humanity and had lost. Their willingness to watch the Tessari die had exposed a moral bankruptcy that would haunt them for generations. As the celebration continued, Nilos approached Marcus with something clutched in his small hands. My grandmother spent her whole life telling stories about the human who saved her, the young Corey said. She taught me that civilization is not defined by power or technology. It is defined by what you do when someone weaker than you needs help. He pressed a small object into Marcus's palm. A Corey blessing stone, worn smooth by generations of handling. She wanted you to have this. She said that someday humanity would need to know that their kindness was remembered, that they were not alone in the galaxy. Marcus looked at the stone, then at the hundreds of species still gathered around his delegation. Beings of light and shadow, crystal and flesh, ancient and young, all of them united by the simple fact that humanity had helped them when no one else would. Faye stepped to his side, her voice thick with emotion. What happens now, sir? Marcus thought of Commander Volkov, waiting in detention aboard the Hopeful, not knowing that her sacrifice had changed galactic history. He thought of Dr. Helen Okonjo and Captain Diego Vargas and Professor Anders Lindquist and Captain Ileana Petrescu, all the humans whose names appeared in those 52 files. He thought of the unknown explorer who had given his life to save Nilus's grandmother and never reported it, never sought credit, never asked for anything in return. What happens now, he said slowly, is that Earth keeps doing what it has always done. We keep answering calls. We keep helping those who need help. We keep being human. He looked out at the stars beyond the chamber's viewports, at the vast galaxy that humanity had stumbled into barely 80 years ago. They had been called reckless and dangerous, too emotional, too irrational, too young to understand the complexities of galactic politics. But 52 species remembered what humanity had done for them. And now the galaxy knew the truth. Earth answered the call. It was simply what humans did, and they would keep answering for as long as the stars burned. The end.